Hello and welcome back to the Wayhaven Chronicles, Book 1. As usual, it's been way too long and I could not remember for the life of me any of the voices except for Verda. But I did rewatch episode 1. So I've got a rough idea, and for most of episode 2 I had no idea what I was doing anyway, because most of the characters I just couldn't really tell A, whether they're male or female, and B, whether what exactly, well, more so who exactly was talking at any given point in time. So it was mostly just a couple of vaguely female voices talking to each other. So we'll try that again if it comes to it once we see those people again. Anyway, next morning back in Wayhaven. It's difficult to decide between weirdos or creepy shadow people as I'm typing up my report the next morning. Not only had I discharged my gun, I'd actually injured one of them, which adds a whole new file of paperwork to fill in. You know what? In reality, uh, nah, you know what? I can't just shirk my responsibilities. I could delay them, but, you know, I feel like putting this option will just mean he'll never do it, so we'll just do it now. Paperwork is tedious, there's no getting around that, but I can't just ignore it. It needs to be done or we'll have no record of the encounter, which could come back to bite me later. I glance up for a moment, staring out my office glass partition to the station beyond and readying myself to settle down further into my chair. I start getting to work, that is, until I hear the gentle echoes of beep bop, beep bop, beep bop. Through the glass, I can see Douglas at the front desk staring down at his phone. He's playing some kind of game on it, and the screen is brightly lit. Um, yeah, sure, let him have a little fun. But if he still does that when someone comes in, we're taking his phone. I shrug at the noise, figuring there's no harm in letting him have a little fun. Life shouldn't be all work and no play, though come to think of it, for Douglas it's pretty much all play and no work. Huh. I sigh at the thought before settling down to start on my paperwork. Suddenly, a welcome visitor appears around my doorway. You okay, Jules? Tina asks, worry in her words. She moves further into the room and shuts the door to my office. I raise a brow at her concern. Why wouldn't I be? When I came in this morning, the night shift volunteer told me you called in from the Ferris warehouse, said you'd had some kind of problem with some strangers. She glances over me. I'm sitting slightly hunched, my body still aching from the confrontation last night. And you're not exactly looking so good. Yeah, the victim had some blurred photos of the warehouse, I reply. So I went to check it out. It ended up being a popular place last night, apparently. She balances herself on the edge of my desk beside me. Who were they? Did you find anything? Hmm, I don't know. One barreled into me, the other seemed more interested in him than me. I don't know who they were, I reply. One of them did barrel into me. I rub at my shoulder, where whoever it was had slammed into me with more force than I've ever encountered. But the other strangers I saw seemed far more interested in the one who hit me than they did in my presence. She places a finger on her pink lips and pouts in thought. Hmm, maybe they were just delinquents? I think they were definitely that, I reply, both of us chuckling. Well, as long as you're okay, she says, glancing down to check on me. I give a nod. Anyway, I'd better get out on patrol, she says. I'm pretty sure my route goes past Haley's bakery. She leaves with a mischievous smile on her face. I try to get back to work, my stomach grumbling at the mention of pastries. Later that day, the rest of the morning passes slowly. The patrol finds nothing unusual and are reliable scouts around town. The elderly, who just love to curtain twitch whenever they get the chance, also haven't seen anything strange, nor any new visitors to Wayhaven. I slap down the phone I had been speaking to Tina on and run my hands over my face. Picking up the tea I made myself a few minutes before, not having had a chance all morning, I gulped back a mouthful. Then I almost spit it back out over my desk, gagging on the cold slop which fills my mouth. It takes all my strength to swallow it down, my face pinching together to force it past my tongue. What is this? I yell, holding up the offending drink towards Douglas through the glass partition. He spins on his chair to face me through the window, glances at the drink, then shrugs. Kettle's broken. And no one thought to tell me? He purses his lips. I just did. I try to grumble through my anger and push myself out of my chair to head to the small kitchen area. The red light on the kettle blinks at me like a heartbeat. Or we couldn't. I lean down towards it, peering at the white plastic shell of the machine. Uh, hmm. Turn it off and back on. Pressing my lips, I reach forward and turn the machine off. I count a few seconds, then turn it back on. Nothing happens. The light still blinks away feebly. I try again, but the same outcome occurs. I guess the coffee's out of the question, and someone says from behind me with a chuckle, "Oh, got that." The new voice makes me whirl around and my brows arc in surprise to see the woman standing before me. Mom! She smiles at me, placing a gentle hand on my arm in greeting. It's more than a bit of a shock to find her standing before me. She's usually away due to her work, a fact that hadn't changed even when I was a child. Hmm, hmm. We'll smile at her. I'm glad you're here, say with a bright smile, but didn't expect to see you. She gives an apologetic nod. Sorry. I haven't come to see you sooner. It's all right, I reply, leading her towards my office. We've both been pretty busy. As we head inside, she glances over to the whiteboard, a head set to one side, with notes and photos of the murder placed on it. So I can see. She takes a seat on the other side of the desk, and I move to sit in my own chair. Why are you here? I finally ask, leaning back in my chair a little to examine her. She hasn't changed much. She's always had a mature, commanding presence. She looks younger than she is, though I do notice a few new wrinkles on her forehead, accentuated by the uncertain frown she now pulls. She looks out of place against the clutter of my office in her pristine grey suit, bright white shirt, and stiff formal posture. The title of Agent Rebecca Lanford growing a bit dull? I say. She shakes her head, folding her elegant hands into her lap. No, work is going fine. A vague response, but that's not unusual. Every time I've attempted to find out more about her job, I'm always met with the same mysterious replies before the conversation quickly changes. The most I know is that she works for some shadowy government agency. She tells me, in fact, that's partly why I'm here. Oh? The case you're working on? The gaze shifts over to the whiteboard once again. It's bigger than you think. Hmm. Great. That's just what I wanted to hear. Great. I groan, rolling my head back and starting at the ceiling for a moment. That's just what I need to hear. I'm sorry to be the bearer of bad news. Her professional expression returns. The. She clears her throat, her brows knotting in a slight frown as though stumbling for a word. The man you're looking for has killed before, in many places. I swallow hard and try not to show my disturbance at this news. And now he's picked Wayhaven as his killing ground? We've been tracking him for months. She stands from her chair and begins pacing. But I don't believe he will be leaving Wayhaven for some time, so now is our last chance to catch him. Why won't he be leaving? I slump back in my chair, a little disheartened by all of this information. She twists around to face me, her lips set into a tight line. I sigh in sudden understanding. It's classified. No, it's classified. She nods. I'm afraid so, but there is something I can offer you. I perk up at this. It must be serious if I'm being offered resources by whomever she works for. It's something the mayor is keen for you to utilize. My excitement deflates a little. Hmm. Does the mayor have that little faith in me? It has nothing to do with that, trust me. She sounds resolute in her reply, but it doesn't help inspire any confidence. Rebecca closes the gap to my desk, placing a hand on mine. I know you can solve this. Otherwise the agency wouldn't have allowed me to let you lead such a big case. They'd be asking me to take over instead. I smile up at her, grateful for the encouraging words, even if I'm not sure I wholly believe them. She pats my hand and moves away, letting out a small sigh. So, what is it you're offering? I ask. My unit. I arch a brow. Pardon? My unit. Team of agents I command. She gives a half smile at my obvious surprise. I didn't even know you had a team. I thought you ran some department. I do. She quickly interrupts. Once again, she stops the conversation about her work before it even begins. I watch as she moves to the doorway, gesturing towards the front doors of the station. I try to peer around her to see who she's calling. but I can't see anything until four women march into the room after my mother. It's hard to keep my jaw from dropping. A group of them look as though they strode straight off the catwalk into my office. I eventually stumble onto my feet and move around my desk. With six of us now crammed into my office, it's beginning to feel a little crowded. However, when I meet the eye of one of the group and she offers a smile, I relax a little. Detective Jules Langford, I'd like you to meet my team. Unit Bravo. None of them says anything in response, and silence begins to descend on the room like an uncomfortable blanket. Do they have names, or do I just call them Thing 1 and Thing 2? My attempt at breaking through the awkward quiet goes unappreciated by most of the group, except the one who smiled at me just moments before. She gives a soft chuckle. Apologies, Dr. Langford, she says, stepping forward and offering a hand. I take it and give a firm shake. My name is Natalie Sewell, but I prefer Nat. There's no distinguishable accent, none at all. Once again, she gives a bright, warm smile, making her dark brown eyes sparkle. She's tall, incredibly so, at least 6 feet at a guess. She withdraws her hand, shoving it into the pockets of her jeans. The earthy tones she wears complement her tawny colored skin. Her wavy dark brown hair is styled up, as casual as her whole being seems to portray, from the leather jacket, open shirt, t-shirt, and jeans to the way she leans back on her heels slightly as she stands. Her lips are still curled into a smile when my gaze has finished passing over her, as though she knew I was inspecting her and was happy to allow it. Nat steps back into the line of her group, standing beside a woman a few inches shorter than she is. The woman stares at me for a moment, her posture stiff and her expression stern. Thankfully, one of the other approaches me before I have to deal with that rather imposing stranger. I'm Farah, the approaching woman says, a more American accent to her tone. Farah Horville. She's quite obviously the youngest of the group, dressed in skinny jeans, a long t-shirt half covered by a heavy cotton scarf, a waistcoat, and large silver hoops that glisten against her shoulder-length black hair. Her rich dark brown skin almost seems to gleam gold in the sunlight, her bold yet feminine features contrasting with the soft smile she throws to me as she throws me. I reach out to take her hand. She shakes it for a moment before clasping it tighter and sauntering a step closer. She's much shorter than that, 5'4" at most, but her entire being is rather overwhelming as she stands so close. A true delight to meet you, detective, she coos, moving close to kiss my cheek in greeting. Uh, it's nice to meet you too. Continue to shake her hand. As she moves closer, then remove my hand from her grasp, unsure what that weird greeting was supposed to be. She stares at me for a moment, cocking her head to one side before giving a light laugh. She then moves back to join her group. I notice Nat shake her head in an exasperated manner at Farah, but the woman only gives a bright grin in return. I shake away the previous introduction, turning to the dark-haired stranger on my right. I'm still attempting not to look at the stern woman standing beside Nat, who continues to examine me with a narrowed gaze. And you are? I asked, holding out a hand in greeting once again. Finding all of this unnecessary, she replies curtly, a gentle, lilting accent to a statement I can't quite recognize. That's a rather long name. Do you have a shorter one? Ra bursts out a laugh, nudging the woman in front of me, who stumbles slightly. Not so clever now, are you, Morgan? She is Specialist Agent Morgan, my mother confirms. The woman introduced as Morgan sneers at her companion. She stands slightly hunched, though she still has to be about 5'7". Waves of layered dark brown hair hang around her long face. Her straight nose and narrow eyes give her a rather wolfish appearance. Her deep tanned skin is painted with light freckles that cover her nose and cheeks, continuing down her neck until they are hidden by a long-sleeved, tight-fitting t-shirt and heavy black jeans. Cords of leather sit around her neck and are tied around her wrists. A crystal dangles on one of the cords, but I barely get a chance to see it before she notices where my gaze has fallen and slips it inside her shirt. I fold my arms across my chest. Charmed. You shouldn't be. She replies, her voice monotone. Now she's just trying to bait me, a dangerous glint flashing in her stormy grey eyes, shadowed by thick manicured brows. I glare at her, not wanting to act unprofessional, but seriously debating it. Save it, Morgan, a voice commands, and I stiffen in eerie recognition. I turn to the imposing, stern-looking woman and frown in confusion. My mother steps forward, a proud smile on her face, yet I continue to stare, her voice still echoing in my mind. It was the same one from outside of the warehouse last night, I'm sure of it. Ah, Jules, let me introduce you to the team leader, Commanding Agent Ava Dumortin. Our narrow stares hold before my mother steps closer once more and leans over to whisper. Is something wrong? Um, you sound awfully familiar. Much like someone I met last night, in fact. A blink coming out of my silence. She eyes me carefully. That seems unlikely. Oh? Yes. She raises a brow. Will arrived in town this morning with your mother. I purse my lips but eventually glance at Rebecca, who gives a nod of agreement. It's true. They arrived with me this morning. Oh, I raise a brow. She has no reason to lie, and it was pretty intense last night. But still, it's hard to keep the suspicion from my expression. There's also the fact I did shoot whoever it was. Looking over the group, no one seems to be doubled over in pain from a close range pistol shot. Shaking my head, I try to push the thoughts to the back of my mind. Then, for the last time, I offer out my hand in introduction. Ava stares down at it as though the gesture is completely foreign, but does eventually take it. I look forward to working with you, she says, every word spoken in a distinct British accent, and each one also sounding like a lie. Likewise, I reply, pulling my hand back and pressing it against my thigh to stop the aching in my fingers from her surprisingly firm grasp. She turns her gaze quickly away, but I let mine linger for a moment. She's easily 5'8" with an athletic build obvious beneath her grey t-shirt and dark combat trousers. Her pale, creamy skin barely has a tan or a flush to it at all, and her dark blonde hair is only just visible, pulled so tightly back into a knot. Everything about her screams soldier, including her stiff, upright posture and emotionless face. Still, I can't deny her long nose and distinctive features make her remarkably attractive. I flinch slightly as her icy green gaze flicks back to meet mine, and I stare back for a moment before we both look away. Well, now that introductions have been made, I hope you'll all work together to find the murderer, my mother says, her gaze shifting pointedly over her team. Unit Bravo were only assigned this case a couple of weeks ago themselves, so they'll be as fresh as you. But I'm proud of their accomplishments so far and have no doubt they will aid you to their highest abilities. Morgan scoffs from where she's balanced herself against the side table in the furthest corner. My mother ignores her, striding past the group towards me. I'm giving you my team to help, so use them as best as you can. They're experienced at this kind of work. She pulls me into a quick goodbye hug, pressing a kiss on my cheek. It's a more affectionate and motherly goodbye than usual, but I return her hug. Well, I'll see you soon, Jules. I should just figure out whether I'll call him Jules or Jules. Well, it'll change a couple of times. Whatever. My headcanon is that people in this universe themselves are not really sure, and Jules never corrects them. My mother heads towards the door, pulling her long jacket about herself tighter. Ava, don't forget the reason your team is here. I frown at the look she throws the leader of the group, a silent exchange passing between them before her heels click over the floor as she leaves. Shaking away the strange moment, I decide where to begin briefing Unit Bravo. Explain what. Sure, we'll start with the victim. I stand behind my desk, pulling out the very thin file on the victim. When I glance up, I find the group have already settled themselves about the room. Their casualness together makes me feel very much like the newcomer, but I brush the feeling away and straighten myself. The victim was a young woman, I begin. The only one who really seems to pay attention is Nat. We're still working to discover her identity, but it seems likely she was not from Wayhaven. Cause of death is also still unknown. Shock, Ava says suddenly from where she stands looking out of the window. I glance over at her, raising a brow. Excuse me? She will have died from shock, she repeats, not bothering to look at me as she speaks. Well, I think I'll wait until our pathologist gives me a report, just in case. It is my first murder, after all. I turn my attention back to the file. That is not exactly how you gain confidence of the group. We did manage to find the victim's phone, which my colleague, Tina Punem, is currently working through. As for the murder itself, we already know about the murder, Ava says, twisting herself around to face me fully. I grit my teeth at the repeated interruptions. Still, I would like to go through all the facts before continuing so as we're all on the same page. As I said, this is my first murder case. I would like to be prepared. She crosses her arms in response, her pale pink lips pulled so tight I wonder if she'll ever be able to make a different expression. We can handle this. This isn't our first murder, detective. My title drips from her tongue, like she's appeasing a 5-year-old. There have already been multiple kills related to this target. Hmm. Hmm. We have to work as a team, me included. I understand you've all obviously been working together for some time, but that doesn't mean you all can't work together with me as well. The look on our leader's face says she's inclined to disagree. Vara replies, a barely hidden snigger of laughter behind her words. Ava stares at me, her eyes slightly narrowed, though apparently in inspection rather than anger. As I stare back at her, holding my ground, I feel an odd tension course through my limbs at our held gaze. At first, I figure it's guilt from interrupting her, but when. Hmm, hmm. I don't have the energy to do that. When attention disappears, I let out a long breath, not having the energy to deal with her right now. If my office is too small to contain her inflated ego, then she can leave. Who's Morgan again? Can we just get on with the job now? Morgan asks, interrupting the silence. Fumbles in the pocket of her jeans before drawing out a gleaming silver lighter, then perching a long cigarette between her lips. Hmm. Point towards the no smoking sign hanging right beside her. Hey, I call, getting her attention before gesturing to the unmissable bright white and red no smoking sign plastered to the wall right beside her. She turns to look at the sign before staring back at me for a moment. She then proceeds to flick open the lighter. A small flame sparks to life, searing the end of the cigarette and making it glow red. She inhales deeply, holding my gaze before puffing out a long stream of grey smoke. This is the team my mother's so proud of? I scoff at the thought. She can keep them. Ava's arms drop to her sides. Morgan's right. We should get on with the task at hand rather than discussing details we already know. Do we have a fire extinguisher somewhere here? I would like to extinguish a fire in here.